Now joining us, old friend Congressman Adam Smith from the 9th District of Washington. Congressman Smith, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
No, we appreciate you coming on. Let's talk about the economy a little bit.
Sure.
Now, President Obama gave a speech a little while ago saying, hey, listen, we're still in choppy waters here, and emphasizing caution, but the economic, at least the job numbers, although they were still high unemployment, was much better than expected. Did that give you some feeling that, hey, we might be on the right track?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely. I think we have to feel good about what has happened in the last couple of months. I don't know if we've hit bottom or at least, starting to see things turn around. But, there's some evidence of things getting better. And, you have to think back to where we were in September and October. When the market crashed, the financial industry appeared on the verge of complete collapse. And then in the first quarter of this year, we had, negative 6.1% growth. And you started seeing visions of, the Great Depression and what could follow from that. But I honestly believe that the Obama administration made some smart decisions, made sure that the financial industry didn't collapse, passed the stimulus bill to help move us forward, passed a plan to help people facing foreclosures, and really laid a course that began to give people some confidence. And consumer confidence is a critical piece of this as well. I'll agree with the president one more time and say we got a long way to go. A lot of difficult decisions, and there was so much money lost in the market crash and the housing crash at the end of last year that continued into this year. That's not something you just wake up one day and get over.
Well, let me give those exact employment numbers, by the way.
Sure.
They were expected to be, for last month, 520,000 new people that were unemployed, but it was actually just 345,000, which is still, of course, a big number. But
Yeah.
And I remember Krugman said that if it was below 500,000, that we were in better shape than he had expected, and
Yep.
it being 345,000 is good. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is I'm worried, Congressman Smith, that we have not fundamentally restructured the financial industry, and that if we leave it as is, that we will run into these same problems again. Are you also concerned about that?
Well, I think that we've done more restructuring in the financial industry than people have given us credit for, and we're not done yet. We certainly passed the credit card reform bill recently. The president has put various compensation limits in place as a result of TARP, and there are plans now in the House and the Senate with the White House to comprehensively reform the way we regulate the financial industry to begin with, to make sure that you don't have these huge pots of money like hedge funds and other places out there that are outside of the regulatory framework, and that they can invest in these derivatives that really amount to gambling. We will have better regulation, and I think as importantly, we'll have better regulators. I mean, keep in mind, in the middle of this whole mess, the regulators who were supposed to be watching it, number one, did absolutely nothing in the derivative and speculation market, and they have broad powers to do so. Credit default swaps do not have to be allowed in any form, much less in the runaway form that they were conducted. We have regulators who could have stepped up to it and chose not to. And most crazy of all, in the middle of it, they allowed investment banks actually to leverage themselves even further, when going from 12-to-1 leverage allowed to 30-to-1. Throwing gasoline on the fire in the middle of the housing bubble. So changing those regulators is no small difference as well.
Well, you brought up a couple of really important issues there. One, let's get specific on what you just mentioned at the end there. They switched it in 2004 from allowing 12-to-1 leverage to 30-to-1 leverage. Have
Right.
you guys switched it back or no?
No, honestly, I really don't know. At the moment, nobody's leveraging a heck of a lot right at the moment. We sort of have the opposite problem, and that
I understand that, but they will certainly have that issue the minute they get a chance.
Oh, certainly.
Bet
Yeah,
your
let me
bottom
just say
dollar.
that. I'm sorry. I don't happen to know on that specific issue, and the point I was making was sort of why I don't know at this moment. That we're focused on other things, but absolutely, we have to go back to the other, more conservative point. And we may well have. I'm not sure. But
right. I don't believe
certainly that's something we need to do.
I don't believe that they have gone back to that rule, and that is a part of what concerns me. We can go to another specific issue that's in the news this week.
Now, let me just be clear on this one point. I have not heard anyone in the Obama administration or any of the regulators say that they don't support going back to that point, or that somehow we have to keep it at 30-1.
So what are they waiting for?
Well, like I said, what they're waiting for is that they got a whole lot of other things right now that are much, much more important in the short term, because we don't have people leveraging. They've spent all that time putting together the way to help people refinance, to help reduce foreclosures. They've had to deal with the bank regulations that they're conducting. They've had to deal with a number of banks that have shut down. So I don't think it's accurate to say that there's a reluctance in the Obama administration to make that change based on what we know.
I think it is accurate, and I'll tell you why.
We disagree.
We do disagree on that, because Tim Geithner, you see, if I thought that that's the direction that they're going to go in, then I would feel, okay, look, they did what they did to stop the bleeding. They did the bailouts, et cetera, but eventually they're going to regulate and bring some sanity back. Right. I'd say, okay, I'm on board for that. That makes sense, right? But I don't get that sense from Timothy Geithner, and this week is a classic example. Big to-do about how they're going to restructure the way that there's compensation on Wall Street. Now, nobody's looking for, as Barney Frank pointed out on television today, to come in and say, all right, here's what a CEO can make and here's what a CEO can't make. No, we don't want that. And we also get on the other end of it that obviously we're going to say, hey, if you're taking TARP money, we can have a say in your executive compensation. I think those 2 points are obvious. But what we were really looking for is something in the middle where Geithner comes out and says, hey, look, the incentive system here is wrong. The CEO picks the boards pick the CEO, and they all decide to pay each other a lot of money, and the shareholders don't have enough voice in any of this. And then the incentive structure is that they take out their bonus money at the end of the year, and of course that's why they think short term, and the corporations get screwed in the long term. Now, none of that was addressed, and instead we got, hey, you know what, I'm going to keep an eye on the TARP guys, which we already knew, and I don't know what we got other than that.
Right. Well, I haven't intimately looked at the details of what they proposed or what Barney Frank is proposing, for that matter. But I know that the one piece of it was to give shareholders greater power to actually control all three of those pieces, you know, the board of directors, the company executives, and also the overall compensation. I'm not sure the details. Let me just say, you know, Geithner and the folks over there have also laid out very detailed plans, as I said, to regulate the entire industry and to have control over derivatives so that you don't have these huge pots of money that are completely outside of regulation. Again, I will say I don't think that that is any small matter. Now, you know,
but
I
that's
think
not
we should,
true, though.
I mean,
look, Congressman Smith, I think that you're in the right place if I've gotten you right. You know, if I think you're saying what you're saying, and I think a lot of people in the House are in the right place, including Congressman Frank. But Tim Geithner says that he's interested in controlling derivatives, but that's not what he does. His proposal does not control derivatives trading at all. He says it's an information clearinghouse, so we might find out about the trades that they make. That's not really regulation at all.
Well, first of all, we haven't yet passed anything, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to keep the dialogue up and keep the pressure on to make sure that whatever we do pass and wherever we go, we do it right. But let me just say there was also a bunch of people, Krugman and others, running around saying that, you know, we got to break up the banks. You know, all the banks are zombie banks, and it's this horrible problem. We got to smash the entire financial system and start over again. And I don't think that was a particularly wise proposal either. So I don't begrudge Tim Geithner or Barney Frank or anybody else taking a couple of months to try and figure out how to make sure we do this right.
So let me ask the question in this way then. If a couple of months down the road, let's say 6 months down the road, let's say 10 months down the road.
By the end of the year, I think is a pretty fair.
Okay, by the end of the year, will you come back on the Young Turks, and then if Tim Geithner still hasn't acted on any of this, will you agree that it was not some sort of strategy to act later when they had the chance, but in fact Tim Geithner does not want to act on any of this?
Well, I mean, hypothetically, yes. If we do absolutely nothing in the next 6 months, you know, then we would be wrong. That would be a huge mistake, and I would, you know, think that that would not be good for the future of our economy. We need to rebuild confidence in investors, and unless you make some pretty significant changes in regulation, you're not going to do that. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here, however, you know, gold rushes have been happening for a long time. And as a public policymaker, when I looked at the tech bubble and the housing bubble and a whole bunch of other bubbles, you know, trying to figure out how to stop people from, you know, going down the road of those you know, bubbles that pop up, is a vexing challenge that we all need to consider. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not something that one regulator can necessarily stop. We also need to change the culture in terms of how we approach those issues. And that's an issue of public leadership and a whole lot of different other things that we've got to touch upon. But you're right. I mean, if we do absolutely nothing on this for the next 6 months, I couldn't possibly argue with the outcome being as you describe it.
Yeah, bubbles don't happen on their own, of course. They happen for reasons. And
well, they happen because people see an opportunity to make a lot of money.
And the regulatory structure is set up in a way that allows them to take extra risks, whether it's because of fiscal policy or whether it's because of regulatory policy. And all those things are at play. But it's not like these, well, what can we do, golly gee willikers, these bubbles popped up out of nowhere. There was reasons why they popped up. One of the reasons, and this will be my final point on this issue, is the Glass-Steagall Act, that we took that away in '99, and that wound up being a disastrous idea. So,
yeah, actually, again, if you actually look at what Glass-Steagall did, it didn't contribute a heck of a lot to this mess. Not to start an argument when you were just trying to close out the point here. But basically, a lot of what was going on, it was already happening. You had investment banks setting up, sub-companies. And again, you had all these hedge funds set up that were totally outside of all this anyway. You had the derivatives being generated in a couple of different places. I don't think there was anything wrong with saying that investment banks or commercial banks or insurance companies, should be able to provide financial services on a broad basis. Glass-Steagall or no Glass-Steagall reform, it wouldn't have worked if regulators did what they did, which was totally took a pass on doing their job. I mean, even if you kept it in place, even if there was no Glass-Steagall reform, if our regulators said, 30 to 1's fine, we're not going to regulate derivatives, we're not going to look at hedge funds, we're not going to look at any of this stuff, we'd still be in the mess we're in. So I don't think it's quite the villain that it's been played out.
All right, I can't agree with that. I think that the fact that Citigroup takes the money of the public and puts it into their bank and then leverages it 30 to 1 on their investment side, and then does the derivatives bet,
right,
then endangers the public money, which is very relevant.
The two biggest folks who dove into the subprime market were Countrywide and Washington Mutual. And they were not investment banks or insurance companies or anything. They were in one and only one lane. And they started this thing off more than anybody else. Fannie and Freddie then dove in as well. They weren't in a bunch of different lanes. They were in one. And they poured gasoline on the fire right from that one lane without regulators looking out. So that's my closing argument.
I hear you on that, and that's a legitimate point. It really is. Now, but when you look at the other law in '99 that was passed, the Commodities Modernization Act, that's even worse. That's where we took all the reins away and said we're not going to regulate these derivatives, which are nothing but high-stakes gambling. So how about repealing that? Or do we have a plan in the House or in the Senate or anywhere to say, hey, we screwed up on that and let's fix that error?
I think that's something we should seriously look at. I'm not sure at this moment where that lies in the various plans that are out there for reforming the regulation.